special episode of the Blue-White Breakdown podcast, but we're going to do something different. I'm Bob Flounders. You can usually find me on all of the Blue-White Breakdown Penn State football podcasts, but we're not going to do that. I'm with my very good friend, Jim Carlson, who you may recognize as the prominent PennLive Penn State wrestling writer. So I think you can see where we're going with this. Jimmy, I've known you for such a long time, and I'm excited about this opportunity. We're gonna start a Penn State wrestling podcast dedicated to the coverage of Cael Sanderson's amazing program. Jimmy's been covering it for us for a very long time. It's going to actually be the PennLive Wrestling Podcast, but this is the first one. It's the pilot, if you will. And I know that I'm rambling because I want to get to Jimmy because I want to hear from him. But yeah, normally this is a football podcast about Penn State football, but we're excited. We're branching out. We're going to dedicate some more coverage to Cael's amazing team. Jimmy's been covering them for a while. I'm going to be helping him this year. Without further ado, my good friend Jim Carlson, it's great to see you. Wrestling is just getting started. We're just getting started, but how are you doing? How excited are you right now?
I'm ready to roll, Bob. It's wrestling season always brings back the energy. Football going away fairly soon, and now it's full-time wrestling.
Yeah, Jimmy is a hardcore Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I believe I have that right. I've worked with Jimmy a long time, starting at the Patriot News. He was actually a boss of mine, very bossy man. No, just kidding. He's a good friend. We've covered a lot of wrestling together, and he's a big supporter of the sport. Jimmy, I think you followed wrestling in one shape or another and covered wrestling in one shape or another for most of your life, and it's something you really enjoy.
It is. It's almost 50 years. Started at Clarion, where I went with Coach Bub for 3 years in the late 70s, and then went to Clearfield in the middle of PA, which at the time was very, very strong wrestling area. District 9, District 6. And then the State College for 8 years, where, at the time, State High was good, Bald Eagle always good, Phillipsburg, Osceola. Those three had some epic duels. And then to Harrisburg in the late 80s, where, you had your Central Dolphins and Cumberland Valleys and Boiling Springs, AAA, AA, where you and I would be squeezed into the penalty box at Hershey Park trying to do the states.
Correct.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit.
But yeah, and that extensive background, I think, has prepared you well to the challenge of covering just an iconic wrestling program here at Penn State. Cael Sanderson, hired, I think, was it in the spring of 2009? It took him very long to get rolling here. He's an all-time great as a wrestler himself, never lost a match. We're not really here to tell you that Penn State wrestling is good. I think if you're listening to this, you know that they're awesome. But what we want to do this year, Jimmy, is kind of try and kind of provide like a look behind the curtain. What's going on with what's going on with Penn State? Why did they win their matches? Who's developing? What are the big matches coming up? What's it like? Just kind of watching Penn State wrestling season unfold and stuff like that. So Jimmy, Penn State is just getting started, but since this is kind of like an intro, there's not a lot of we don't really need to get to a lot of details about this season so far. I think there's a match at Lehigh a week as we take this on a Wednesday, a week from Sunday in Allentown. We're both going to be there. Looking forward to that. But just for the fans that are just watching this, listening to this, wherever they can get their podcasts, the PennLive Wrestling Podcast, I'm fascinated to ask you this. What is it like? What is it like covering somebody like Cael Sanderson?
It's good. Oh, you want more than that?
Just a little bit more, yeah.
No, it's incredibly it's interesting, sometimes challenging, but for the good. I mean, he is very driven. He is very loyal to his team, to his coaches. When we stand at interviews, we do it in the hallway outside the wrestling room.
Yeah.
And then his wrestlers come down the hall, go into the room, and he either waves, nods, or says hello to all of them, and they return that. And you think it's some kid at some point would say, "Oh man, I got to go to practice today," but I've never seen that. Very sincere. I love the sport. Always has. I've spoken with him now since my PennLive days. Well, pretty much since he started here, and he's. It's interesting because you get more from him. A lot, probably deeper answers, as it were, when you're either alone or just one or two people. And he's a lot more at ease and feels comfortable. Plus, he had that trust level. He's also funny. He's got that dry wit.
Yeah.
Just out of nowhere, it comes. And he's also, I would think he called himself lucky because of his staff. His brother, Cody, Casey Cunningham, those two have been with him since the Iowa State days, where he was 3 years as head coach before coming here in 2009. And then he's had a few, the fourth coach after that, like most recently Jake Vaughn, and now he hired Jimmy Kennedy, who's David Taylor's brother-in-law, and then Taylor took him to Oklahoma State with him. He just hired Nick Lee, who I think the wrestlers just really love being around because he's still competing. They, the lightweights anywhere from 25 to, Lee was 41, so probably all the way up to 157. Lee probably can still win, right?
That's intimidating and daunting.
Yeah, and that's what I think attracts a lot of the wrestlers there. Is
you get beat up in the wrestling room, yes, and learn from that, and then take it out on your opponents on the mat. I got you.
Exactly. They get humbled in there, and they compete in the club and in the wrestling club, and that's just, loaded with talent.
Yeah. I wanted to just touch on one thing you said because I actually have had some interactions with Cael on those Penn State football caravans. I don't know if you remember, they used to have them, whether it was with Bill O'Brien for a couple of years or early in James Franklin's tenure, they would have that off-season caravan. Because Penn State was they were trying to reestablish themselves. It was, they were coming out of what had happened, with the Sandusky scandal, and they did in the spring. They did a lot of meet and greets, and they would have a lot of coaches other than James or Bill come on, and Cael would every once in a while he would show up and just great. You mentioned his dry wit. He was incredibly funny. Like just. You could tell he was relaxed. They weren't really here to see him. He would always wear a shirt that said James Franklin's biggest fan or Bill O'Brien's biggest fan. He had a big smile on his face. And I think that is, when you think about Cael and trying to be the head of this program, I do think away from the sport when he can relax, I'm sure he's a little bit different. And I did pick up on that dry sense of humor, and I'm sure it surfaces when he's not in front of a big crowd, but what if it's just kind of a one-on-one or something like that? I'm sure that is something, Jimmy, that you enjoy. It's the PennLive Wrestling Podcast, but we are doing this, Penn State fans, as part of the Blue-White Takedown podcast because it's the pilot episode. But Jimmy Carlson and myself, Bob Flounders, are going to be here to kind of steer it through the Penn State wrestling season. That's the plan. I'm going to lead a lot on Jimmy, but that's nothing new. But I wanted to just get to a couple more points here on this.
Excuse me, Bob. Did you say Blue-White Breakdown or Blue-White Takedown?
Well, I think right now we're just going with Blue-White Breakdown.
Oh, gotcha.
Blue-White Takedown would fit, but it's gonna or confusing people. It's gonna actually be, I think, the PennLive Wrestling Podcast. But Jimmy, there's a couple things I wanted to get to here on this, and one is, I believe I was doing a little prep, Jimmy. It's 11. They've won 11 wrestling titles. That's right, under Cael. Is that right, or is it more?
Yeah. This year will go for 12 out of the last 14. Yeah,
they're going for 12 out of the last 14.
Right.
And somehow this team could be his best team, which to me is incredible because those other teams were pretty good. So just that perception for the fans, how accurate is that? Assuming good health, we're just getting started, but is that true? There is a chance in your mind that despite all of these titles, this could be his best team.
Oh, I do. Last year, they scored 172.5 points, exactly 100 points more than Cornell, which was, both were records. And think about that. That's it's sort of hard to do.
Right.
Now, this year they were just at the Army tournament over the weekend, and they have two weights in question, 157, 197. And then they have a freshman at 125, Luke Lillidahl, who made his debut last Sunday at home against Drexel, but Drexel had to forfeit, so nobody got to see him wrestle. So he won at Army. He beat a teammate, Kurt McHenry, in the semifinal. McHenry is a transfer from Michigan. He's been around like a 6-year guy. He handled him fairly well, 8-2. But he's a under 20 world champion. And so my point here is that right now he came into the rankings this week at number 24, and it's a pretty strong weight class, but he will skyrocket up those rankings. I'm pretty sure about that.
Wow.
Then at the moment, let's get to the other two weights. 157 is it's between Tyler Casack and Alex Facundo.
Right.
Facundo redshirt last year, took an Olympic redshirt. Casack started at 141, had to go to 149 when Shane Van Ness got hurt, ended up losing his first match at the NCAAs and winning 7 straight, again, which is, almost unfathomable to place third as a true freshman at 149. So now he has bulked up to 157. He beat Facundo 5-2 at Army over the weekend. Will he go against Lehigh? My gut would be yes, unless Cael really strongly wants to redshirt him.
Yeah.
I'm sure Casack doesn't want to do that. But, you look back at Zane Rutherford in 2015, he didn't want to redshirt either. And he wrestled as a freshman. And all of a sudden he was told as a sophomore he was going to redshirt, but it sort of worked out for him with three fights.
Cael wants you to do something, you're probably going to have to do it.
Right. And at 197, Josh Barr went up from 184 when Starachi bumped up from 174. So his challenge in-house is Lucas Cochran, who has done the team, he's been a super sub for them.
Right.
Last year, he was a very light heavyweight, but he beat a couple of ranked heavyweights. He beat from Michigan State, from Rutgers. But Barr beat him pretty handily at Army, and he's a beast. So, again, probably expect to see him as well. Then you look at the returning champs, couple of runners-up, and yes, if those 3 weights produce, the other ones are about guaranteed to do so, and that equates to a lot of points.
I think what you're saying in the best possible way, Jimmy, is it's an embarrassment of riches.
It is.
When you say that, that's a good thing. Like if that's you want to have an embarrassment of riches. That's what it sounds like to me. Jimmy, there's one more thing I want to get to you.
One thing, Bob.
Sure.
You talked about embarrassment of riches, and it is not easy building depth with 9.9 scholarships. Now that might go away, and that's another story for another time.
Yep.
There'll be unlimited scholarships probably in the roster cap, but anyway, it's very hard to do, and there have been many years, most years really, when if somebody goes down with an injury, the person coming in isn't elite level.
Right.
Okay, let's just leave it at that. And they're competitive and all, but they're not going to win the big matches. This year, last year, and now with this year's freshman class coming in, they can sub at an elite level. And these guys stick around. You would think that someone would want to leave.
Nope.
And I think it's with club itself, the competition, they know what can happen in the future if they stick around. So they're very deep this year. Very deep.
They sound extremely deep, very, very deep. There's two things real quick. You had mentioned the Lehigh match, Sunday, December 8th. We talked about it earlier.
2 o'clock. It's just this morning they announced a sellout.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of sellouts, but there's a chance here on the PennLive Wrestling Podcast we might have a special guest maybe next week that might preview when we preview the Lehigh match. We're working feverishly behind the scenes. We could, Penn State fans, have a special guest. We can't confirm that. Hopefully we can. And Jimmy, before we let you go here on this first episode, just real quick, you talked about how good this team is, but are there one or two wrestlers on this team for the fans and then for yourself that are maybe not quite established yet that you're looking forward to seeing compete and develop, and also maybe the fans want to pay close attention to a kid or two just to watch because you have a feeling they could be really good by the end of the year?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with 133 with Braden Davis. Now, he was a 4-time state champ out of Michigan, came in last year at 125, ended up winning the Big Tens with an incredible Big Ten tournament, won that championship, earned the first seed at the Nationals, but he failed to place. Okay. He lost to Richie Figueroa from Arizona State in the quarters, I believe, and Richie ended up winning it all. And then he lost, I believe, to a Wyoming kid, Joré Volk, who will be in Red Call in a couple of weeks at 125, but Davis now at 133. Davis at 133 this year. He had trouble making 25 last year and holding it. He got hurt against Drexel, and he did not wrestle against Army. From what Cael says, it's not all that serious. I think they just wanted to rest him. I guess my point with him is that I'm not sure. I don't know if he's been hurt before, and I'm not sure how he handled it. He didn't look sharp against Drexel, right? And then the knee thing happened. But obviously, after last year, you can see his potential. Right. And he goes into 33, and that will be another. If they get a lot of points out of him on the national scale, then you Bartlett, Van Ness. Not to say about those because they're so good. We do want to see, like we mentioned about Kasak, Mitchell Messenbrink. He's probably off the charts as far as potential. Levi Haynes bumped up 2 weights, and again, a little off course here, but Levi Haynes comes in as a freshman out of Biglerville. He did not participate his senior year at Biglerville because he came up to train with at the M2 Center here with Taylor, and it was tough, getting a couple of words out of him, as a freshman during interviews. Yeah. And now he's just so comfortable. And now plus not losing, 10, 12 pounds a week to make one.
He's in a better mood.
Yes. And he's bulked up. He told me earlier in the season that he was able to lift a lot of weights instead of just lifting for, endurance and reps. He's lifting a lot more weight to become stronger. He's still probably walking around at 180, so he's still cutting. But can you imagine cutting 157, every time? And Cael said he was just so meticulous at it, that he was so good at it, that Cael never thought he would hold 57 for 2 years. But he will, I just can't. Well, and another great thing with Haynes is the match with Keegan O'Toole, 2-time NCAA champ, 4-time placer. Sort of has the Starachi rule there. He's going for a 5th NCAA this year. And they could meet in Nashville at the end of December at the, I forget the name of the tournament down there, but NWCA event. But Haynes, Starachi, of course, bumps up, and he's going for an unprecedented 5th title. And barring Kirkfleet, the last 2 weights, Kirkfleet, everybody now is going to want to see Kirkfleet versus Gable Stevenson. Stevenson, 2-time.
You're going to want to see it, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. His only 2 losses to Anthony Cassar in the Big Tens and the NCAAs, and now he's back going for a 3rd title in Minnesota, and that immediately bumped Kirkfleet from his number 1 ranking down to number 2.
Right.
and they won't meet till the Big Tens, but be a lot of muscle flying around there when those two meet.
Yeah. All right, Jim, just so you know, Penn State wrestling fans, you mentioned Levi Haynes, Big Liberal High School, one of my favorite all-time mascots for Big Liberal, the Canners. It's one of my favorites, Jimmy. I think you get a kick out of it too. And also, just to decide if any of the Penn State wrestling fans are watching this or listening to this or know me at all, I'm not cutting any weight, man. I am not. There's no cut. I couldn't cut 6 ounces right now. So I do appreciate guys who can make that drop in the prime of their lives. I'm still in my prime, but just not that kind of prime stuff. But no cutting weight, Jimmy.
Okay, well, I could make 97, Bob, but I'd last about 20 seconds.
About that, we'll see about that, Jimmy. The season's just getting started. All right, Jimmy. Hey, listen, I'm excited really to do this with you. Having worked with you, having followed your stuff, knowing how much you know about wrestling in general and Penn State wrestling specifically. I think you're a natural for this. I'm looking forward to being here with you. Penn State fans, this was our first episode. It's actually, technically, it's the Blue-White Breakdown, but it's going to be the PennLive Wrestling Podcast moving forward. We plan to have one next week, maybe with a special guest, to tee it up for Penn State's match against Lehigh in the Lehigh Valley. So we're looking forward to that. But it was great, Jimmy, chatting with you. This is going to be our home. We're looking forward to it, guys. And we're going to see you next week.
Bob, I appreciate all your leads and good conversation. And let's do this again.